Okay, so we're going to run about 10 of these through 2024-25, and this is the first. I thought I ought to just start off with trying to get a big picture. I've dug into a little bit of the history, but don't worry, I think we're going back only about 3.9 billion years. And then we might move forward even further into the future, but the purpose of these meetings is to inform ourselves. And so we have some experts. This evening we've got a couple of people. We've got Dorothy Stein, who will be speaking after me, and then Les Moore, who's going to come on a little bit later. The title of this evening was Staying Alive, and the idea of ecosystems and biodiversity. The purpose, hopefully, is staying alive. I've been an academic in fine art and then design. The most recent book is called Meta-Designing, Designing in the Anthropocene. The design industry's created a lot of mess, and we need to redesign design. Another book, previous book, is the idea of micro-utopias. Because lots of people will say, oh, your ideas are very utopian. In other words, they're bad, because we'll never reach utopia. True, we probably don't want to, but we can at least set off for utopia and get some way. That's kind of said enough about me. The St. John's Society started off as very local because we had Leitzer and Gordon saved the duck pond from destruction. And that was the first thing. So it's really important to start with the local and the immediate. But now we're trying to branch out and try to develop a bigger picture, but keeping in touch with the local. The idea of conservation is a really intriguing one. It set up lots of discussions about what we are going to conserve. What should we conserve? Particularly now that we have, arguably, future to conserve more than the past, and it's more important, some would say. There are lots of elements to building a community and making it sustainable. I don't like the word sustainable, mainly because it doesn't really say who sustains what. But one of the methods would be to develop pride. And this is Almatishta Wood's bridge mural that you probably know, which I think is a very cheap way to cultivate local interest and engagement and ownership. So the idea of the local is a really interesting idea, particularly in a globalized society. It's very hard to be purely local. You can't really, can you? Or at least it would be very hard. So it kind of invokes the notion of what's happening everywhere, because we're part of that process. And one of the words I really like is paradigm, because some people think it's a bit posh, but paradigm, in a way, is what goes down and what is so normal that we don't see it anymore. And in the last couple of days, I've seen a couple of guys pulling very large packs of bottled water, carrying them on buses, and I'm thinking, well, why do they spend so much money on plastic and water that's 500 times more expensive than tap water, and is no better, in fact, possibly worse? Yes, thank you. But maybe they like drinking plastics. So this is one of the challenges, that if we want to change the paradigm, we also have to see what the paradigm is, or better still, we have to imagine another paradigm, a better way. So it saves all that protest, which isn't getting us where we want to be at the moment. So a lot of people would say we're running out of resources. I don't know whether you agree with that. We're running out of the things that are in demand, and we have an economic system that looks at the supply and demand. I would argue that we're running out of imagination, or we lack imagination rather than materials, because if we're all going to, so how do we think beyond the current paradigm? And every time I hear on the radio or TV what's going down, it's always growth, 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 yeah. Isn't it? But never mind, we're going to have an election soon, and we'll soon have somebody else who will come in and say the same thing, in a slightly different colour, perhaps. Okay, so how do we do this, and how do we make it work in the local? Arguably, this is the sort of local and immediate that we can solve through the advertising, that the moment of buying, that rush when you buy something, is really what makes us real in the consumer paradigm. But the now and the here is very, very important. So we're going to have to redesign what it is to be here in the present. But this is a much longer term way to see it. So I've always been bothered by how incredibly short-term our thinking seems to be. And I got dropped out of a project because I mentioned 500 years. And nobody said no, but I didn't receive any more requests. So let's imagine, in terms of extending the social distance as far as you can, and then also time as far as you can. Now much more in touch with our gut bacteria, aren't we? But we're also thinking about other people who are around the other side of the world, we'll never meet, that we're trading with all the time. We could think ahead 1 billion years because we have 1 billion years of free sunshine left. And that's something that I don't hear very often in the news. So if you think about it like that, the very, very long term, well, at least thinking about growing something for your great-great-great-grandchildren, quite good. But we should be able to relax, given that we know that technology will catch up and supersede what we have now. And I think we get something like, is it a kilowatt per square metre for every part of the Earth, on average. So it's a huge amount of energy. We just need to find ways to maybe chill out a bit. We don't all have to jet around all the time. Lots of people seem to see it as a badge of honour to fly repeatedly short distances. Okay, let's drop back to the origins of the St. John's Society. 3.9 billion years ago, arguably the first single-cell organisms. What can we learn from that? We're finite, we eat, and then we're eaten. Because I think one of the problems we have with any local societies is that you will disagree. All the oldest jokes in the world are all to do with the guys in the next village being a bit stupid. If we start with very big, broad brushstroke values, we can then move down to the detail and disagree on some of the minutiae. 5 million years ago, we had a start. We're still very similar in many respects to these guys. But one of the things that I think has been missed with a lot of history is that arguably we're really designed to live in larger group sizes than chimpanzees. They will live in 30 or 40 group sizes, and we can, because of our brain size, we can live in groups of 150. But our economy is based on much bigger systems. That has produced all sorts of changes. We can learn from these guys. Historically, over the last 10,000 years, we've had a process of alienation that began from colonization, and then we created surpluses, and then we food surpluses that enable us to trade. And then 4,500 years ago, we invented alphabetical writing and counting systems. And what that's done is that we've now become used to a kind of bureaucratic way of life, instead of living locally as we used to. What happened in this process is that real people became roles. We standardized. The whole process of evolution was based on diversifying. We found that by mechanizing and having technology, we needed to have standards and codes that we could agree. So accountability replaced responsibility. And so that's something that, again, we can learn anew if we rescale. And in fact, the third person talking this evening, Les Moore, will be talking about local currencies. He's been involved with local currencies and also permaculture. And arguably one of the bigger problems here is that because we're chimpanzees, part of our brains are chimpanzees, we get very attracted to money. Money works because we see a kind of glow. Every time you hear a figure, you hear a sum of money, you think, oh, I could spend that on this and this and this. So we get very addicted to this process, and this is what is partly driving the world as we know it. But the whole process of having lawns of one species is a kind of leftover from power, from colonialization, arguably. The idea of a lawn is a beautiful thing. Originally, in the 16th century, I think it meant a place of worship, and it would have been very diverse, and it would have afforded food growing for the locals. Where, of course, now it's one species with chemicals and all sorts of motorized devices to thrash the hell out of it. But it is. So it's a conspicuous waste of space. Yes, I own this, so I don't even need to grow food on it. I'm so wealthy. One other aspect of this lack of diversity is the fact that it has required more energy, and now we're looking for lower energy systems. We can think ahead to greater diversity. In fact, one of my slogans is a diversity of diversities. What Paul didn't say is that he and Nick brought in this rain garden that's happened over the last year of the St John Society. So we're getting in touch with the council about, and other bodies, in terms of agreeing that we need diversities and fail-safes to protect against rain and the bad weather that we can get. And the other good news is that Deptford High Street is the coolest place on the planet, according to one of the newspapers. And one of the reasons why it is so cool is the shopping diversity. So it's another one of the diversity of diversities that can lead to, ultimately, a synergy of synergies. If we have greater diversity, then the need to travel at great distances and at great speed is reduced. That's all I have to say for the moment.